For this lesson, let's layer on some additional secondary criteria, which is how easy it is to source and import this particular product. For this lesson, let's layer on some additional secondary criteria, which is how easy is it to source this product, import the product, and lastly, how many headaches will it give you selling this particular product? Let's start by talking about how easy it's going to be to source this particular product. Now, there's lots of factories all over the world, and our supplier database makes it much easier to find these particular factories. That being said, if you're making a lot of changes to your product, it's going to be more difficult to find a factory that wants to work with you and that will be able to produce that to a high quality. If you're making a change to your product, like a different material thickness or a different color or a different brand of zipper or something along those lines, those are going to be easier modifications for the factory to make. If it's going to require an entirely new mold or some significant changes, it's going to be much harder to find a factory that's willing to make that without first hiring an engineer or someone to come up with the drawings and send those to the factory. Let me give you an example here. One of the products we sell here at Jungle Scout are hooded baby towels. And after finding this product, we made some improvements to it. Some of the bad reviews of our competitors were saying it's too thin and it falls apart too easily. So we sold a very similar towel, however, with a thicker fabric layer. This was a relatively easy change for the factory to make because we just told them, hey, what types of fabric do you have that are a little bit thicker? And we ended up going with one of those. On the other end of the spectrum, let's pretend you want to make a new type of coffee mug. If you want your coffee mug to be a different size or a different shape or whatever else, then the factory is probably going to require a new mold to be made. In order to make this new mold, they first have to make samples, and the process of going through this is going to be much more complex. This doesn't mean it's not doable, but just keep that in mind when you're thinking about what types of changes, if any, you want to make to your product. In general, it's best to try to choose a product that's relatively simple, doesn't have a lot of moving parts, isn't easily breakable or complex, and you don't need parts or materials sourced from different vendors and put together in one central location. If you can avoid those things, then you're off to a good start. For this next section, let's talk about how easy it's going to be to import this product. Now, smaller and lighter things, those are always going to be a little bit easier to import and to ship than big, bulky, heavy items, as you can imagine. That being said, it's still not that bad to import big, bulky items. There are certain types of regulations that don't allow us to import certain products into the US or other countries for that matter. These are typically going to be things like hazardous materials or living plants or animals. However, there are a few other strange items like magnets that are more difficult to import. If you think your product might fall under one of these categories, I would encourage you guys to contact a freight forwarder, and they, for free, will be able to tell you whether or not you're going to run into issues importing this into the US. For the last section, let's talk about how many headaches it's likely that this product's going to give you. Simple items that don't break easily and don't often have problems are just going to be easier for you to sell. A great example of this is one of the other products we sell here at Jungle Scout called Jungle Sticks. These are bamboo marshmallow sticks. They're 3 feet long. It's very hard to break these. As a result, they don't get returned often, and they're all around just a pretty headache-free product. Now, of course, not all products are going to be like that. And there's a whole spectrum from a 0 headache product to a lots of headaches product. Some of the things you can be asking yourself when you're choosing your product are things like, is it breakable? If so, maybe you can combat that with good packaging, but a good thing to ask yourself. Is it likely that a lot of customers are going to want to return this? So maybe there's sizing that only fits certain people that would increase the likelihood of it getting returned. Is it hard to use? For example, are people going to have lots of questions and not read the manual or not know how to put it together? That's an important thing to ask yourself. How long is the product going to last the customer? If it's likely that it breaks quickly or doesn't last very long, that's an important thing for you to know before you get into this. Do you think it's likely you'll get a lot of negative reviews? If so, can you fix any of them? And lastly, is it really big, oversized, and really bulky? If so, the likelihood of this giving you headaches is going to increase. At the end of the day, you're just asking yourself, is this product going to be a pain to sell? Or is it something that's relatively simple that as a result will be mostly headache-free? The goal of telling you guys about all these different types of secondary criteria is to hopefully help you narrow down your choices from lots of products to sell to a few that you think would be the best out of your group. Now, it's very rare that you find a product that has really high demand with really low competition and great margins and no headaches and everything else. So I just want to inform you guys about these different pieces of secondary criteria so you can help gauge and understand, okay, this product has really high margins, but maybe a few more headaches, but to me, it's worth it to sell. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the next lesson where we narrow down all of our different product ideas by using this secondary criteria as a filter. I'll see you there. For this lesson, we want to look through all the different product ideas that we've come up with and put into our tracker and narrow them down based off the secondary criteria that we spoke about in the previous lessons. As a recap, the first round was all about determining the demand and the competition as well as our profit, whereas our second round, our secondary criteria, is a little bit more subjective and is more so about the feasibility of each of these product ideas. Over time and with experience and repetition, these secondary criteria metrics will become more part of your thought process, but for now it's best to capture all of the ideas and then narrow them down after the fact. Let's jump into my product tracker and take a look. I have in my product tracker all of the products that we've found in previous lessons, and now I can start to look at these and narrow them down based off the secondary criteria. An example of this would be, let's take a look at this top one, neon body paint. Now, gauging off the average units sold and the average reviews, it looks like a pretty solid product. But if we think about some of our secondary criteria, one red flag I would have for body paint would be that it goes on the body and as a result could potentially be a higher liability product than some of the other ones. Another thing I can look at here is the average rating. And I see that some of these, like the tubing as well as the artificial plant, already have quite a high average rating. In comparison to the chicken cups, the average rating is much lower, which says to me that there's a higher likelihood that I could find something on this type of product, the chicken cups, to improve upon. This is also a great opportunity to just look at all of the product ideas, an overview of them, and this is an easy way to gauge the demand and competition, as well as start to get some idea about the secondary criteria here and pit them against each other here in the overview page. I would recommend that it's always good to have some backup ideas on deck because sometimes you find out that there ends up being a red flag or you can't find a good manufacturer or it costs more to ship than what you expect or a host of other problems. And by having backup ideas, then you can move on to one of those ideas. If you choose to remove some of the product groups because they didn't meet the secondary criteria, or it's just the worst one out of all of the product ideas you've come up with, I would recommend that you then find additional product ideas to replace them. A lot of the most successful sellers that we work with are always doing product research and always adding product ideas to their backlog. Even if you choose to move forward with your top choice, it's always good to have additional product ideas for when you're ready to expand your product line to additional products. At this point, you should have at least 2 or 3 good products that have passed all the points that we've talked about. We are set up for success. We know people are buying similar products. We know we can compete with the current sellers. We know we'll make money on these products. We know we can make a product customers will love. We know we are allowed to sell it and it's low risk. We know we can get it manufactured and imported easily. And with that, we know we will succeed with this product. The point right now is to find a good first product, profitable and easy to get started. It doesn't have to be a complicated process or a product that meets every single criteria to a T. We're getting very close to the end, and in the next lesson, we're gonna pick the product to move forward with. I'll see you in there. Nice job on doing all the product research to get to this point. In this lesson, we're gonna choose the product we want to sell. This is one of the most fun parts, and you get to decide what you want to sell, and this is ultimately gonna be your business. You've already done all the work, you understand all the criteria, and all